let's get into the first quadrant of emotional intelligence. And look at what the first quadrant is. Hopefully you can read it, okay? First quadrant is self-awareness. Okay, so what is self-awareness? Right? Think about that for a second. What is self-awareness, and how do you be self-aware? That's a really powerful point. I mean, how many times have you had an experience where you're interacting with someone and like you could just feel like they have no self-awareness, and it's like so annoying, and you're thinking, well, why don't they have any self-awareness, right? And so you can think for yourself. I mean, how many times have you been in a situation where you're like, dang, why did I react like that? Or why did I say that? Like, I wasn't even thinking, I myself have done that many, many, many times, I can totally get it. So think about this for a second. Let me give you a definition of what self-awareness is, okay? Here's my definition. Self-awareness is the power to observe your own psychology in motion, right? I'll say it a little differently. Self-awareness is the ability or the capacity to watch your own psychology in action. It's the ability to separate yourself from your psychology. Right? And that's kind of cool because it brings to light an interesting concept, which maybe you've heard of this before, and I've written about it here. I think it's chapter 5 that I wrote about it, but it's about being able to become what is called the observer, right? Or the watcher, right? The observer. And like, well, what is the observer? And a lot of people, if you meditate or if you've read anything about, Eastern wisdom, you've seen this concept before, right? The observer is really it's kind of the higher aspect of your psyche. You could consider that in a sense, and I think this is actually pretty true. If you look at the way the human brain is designed, and I'll actually show you a book because this inspired me when I first learned about this. This is Carl Sagan, The Dragons of Eden, okay? And Carl Sagan talks about the human brain and how we have 3 different layers to the human brain, okay? So we have on the top layer, I don't know how good my face is going to be here, but he's got an interesting chin. Give him an eyeball. Anyway, so this is a person. I don't know what's wrong with him. But anyway, so at the top layer, we have the neocortex. That's the human brain, okay? That's our higher brain. Then inside of our brain, we have a mammal brain, a monkey brain. This is the limbic system, the mammal brain. This is where our emotions are happening, okay? And then inside of that, we have our reptile brain, which is called R complex. And that's where our instincts are happening. Fight, flight, freeze. That's all happening there. Okay? So when you're interacting with someone, you have to understand that, we're designed to survive. We're designed to not die. Okay? So whatever's coming at you, whatever stimulus is coming at you, you're going to have a response to it. Most of the time, it's going to keep you alive. It's going to cause you to survive. As a human being in the modern world, we don't always have to survive physically, but a lot of times it's about our ego or our ego identity. Like, someone disrespects you and it really pisses you off and you want to get like almost violent with them. You want to yell at them. You want to be upset. Why? Because it was a threat to who you know yourself to be. Or what if somebody criticizes you in front of a group or makes you feel stupid, especially in front of other people? Like, you want to respond to that in a way that blasts the other person, right? Why? Because your ego, your identity is being harmed in your own thoughts, right? So that's what's happening at a lower level, right? Like in the lower brains, you're basically having a reaction to someone's attack. But when you can step up and operate up here in the higher brain, right? You can look down. You can be the observer looking down at your emotions. Remember, your emotions are happening here in the middle brain. That's where your emotions are happening. They're not happening from the top layer. That's where your thoughts are happening, okay? Thoughts are happening in the cortex, but your emotions are happening down in the limbic system. So by becoming the observer, you actually can step up and beyond your emotions and watch your emotions. And that's the key, is to become the observer of your emotional states, the observer of your psychology. Now, of course, your question is, well, how do you do that? And fundamentally, it's really just about practicing, right? Well, and how do you practice? Well, let's deal with the first thing. How do you learn to ride a bicycle? Well, you get on a bike and you fall down a bunch of times, and then you get back up until eventually you stabilize and you discover the gyroscopic stability of a bicycle in motion. You discover it. Like you start to feel it. And it's the same way. By practicing being the observer, right? You start to get a sense for, whoa, I'm not my psychology. I'm not my ego. I'm actually something beyond the ego. And in the literature about becoming the observer, you will see that there is something called the self and there is something called the ego. Okay? The ego is down here, like a little bird in a tree eating a bunch of fruit, and it's just eating all the fruit, and some of the fruit is sour. It's like, I hate that. Or some of it's sweet, and it's like, oh, that's really good. And the little ego is this little bird just running around in reality, reacting and eating and doing different things, and it's not thinking about its reaction. It's just happening. But in your psyche is another bird. Imagine your psyche is like a tree. Well, at the lower branches is your ego doing all this stuff. But in the higher branches is yourself, your higher nature, right? Even could just be your higher brain, okay? When you pull back, right? Imagine watching yourself. Just take a moment, get neutral, be neutral about things. Instead of being reactive, be neutral and just watch. There's a part of yourself that's having an experience, and there's a part of yourself that's watching yourself have an experience. When you can start to practice being the part of yourself that's watching yourself have an experience, you've become the observer. And when you become the observer, that means that you have separated yourself from the power of the emotional reaction, and now you can start to exert power to respond the way you want to. So by becoming the observer, you literally engage your power to be self-aware, and now you get to enter into the quadrant of self-regulation where you can actually start to choose how you want to respond. And that's pretty cool, because think about it. How does that apply in relationships? How does that apply in teamwork? How does that apply in leadership? How does that apply in influencing, in being able to resolve conflicts, in being able to, cause outcomes? Well, if you're in command of your leadership space, your power to influence other people, then you can make a difference for others. But if you're not in control of yourself, well, you really can't make a difference for others, because you can't make a difference for yourself. See, this is why self-awareness is the first quadrant. When you gain the power over yourself, now you have a possibility of influencing others.